In this video, I'm going to take you through the different features of the ID mixer that controls iD44. If you want information on a particular section of the ID mixer, then go to the video description for timestamps of the different sections, so you can skip ahead. On a Mac, double-click on the ID mixer in your application menu. This will launch the app and create a menu bar item in the top right of the screen. The mixer window should then open so long as your unit is connected and powered on. If you close the mixer window, you can reopen it at any time by clicking on the ID icon and selecting Show Mixer Window. On Windows, click the ID mixer in the application menu to launch the app. This will open the mixer window when iD44 is connected and also create an icon in the system tray where you can open the mixer window and change settings like iD44's sample rate and buffer size. Simply put, the ID mixer is the control center for your ID interface, allowing you to customize functionality and settings to make iD44 work best for your workflow. The ID mixer is made up of a few different sections. The channel section displays your analog and digital inputs, as well as your DAW returns, or in other words, the audio coming back from your digital audio workstation or computer. The master section contains the cue mixes and the monitor controls. Then finally, you have the system panel, which enables you to control your routing and other settings. We will look at the routing options available in more detail later in this video. So the channel section is what you will use to build up your main and cue mixes, or in other words, the audio you want to send out of iD44, whether it's your full DAW mix going to your main speakers, or a separate headphone mix with a click track to an artist you're recording. There are three kinds of channels: mic channels, digital channels, and DAW returns, and these individual types can be hidden using these channel toggle buttons in the master section to help keep things tidy. The four mic channels show you the signal from the mic and line inputs. The digi channels show any signal from the optical inputs, and the DAW returns display the audio coming back from your computer, where the iD44 output in your DAW will correspond to the DAW return channel. For example, output 1 and 2 will go to DAW 1 and 2. And output 3 and 4 will go to DAW 3 and 4, and so on. This will come in really handy when sending out separate artist mixes or processing audio with outboard gear. At the top of each channel is the customizable channel name. You can double-click on this and type the name that you want to help organize your mixer app. Once named, if you forget the input type or get a little lost in the mixer window, you can hover over the channel toggle buttons and the type of input will appear under the name. On the analog and digital input channels, a polarity reverse button can be found below the naming strip for dealing with phase issues caused from multiple microphones, such as top and bottom miking a snare or the front and back of a guitar cab. Next up, you have the pan controls to position your signal in the stereo field. You also have the stereo grouping button, letting you control the levels of a stereo source by grouping together two adjacent channels. The solo and mute buttons allow you to quickly isolate channels, which can be useful if you want to check that a particular input is sounding good without any distraction from other sources. Finally, you have the meter and the fader. The meter displays the dBFS value, which is the level that comes into your computer. If the input is set too loud, the peak LED will light up, meaning you have clipped your converters and could end up with some bad sounding distortion. We recommend setting your input so at the loudest point you're peaking at -10 dB. The fader is used to set the monitoring level of a channel for the particular mix you're working on, and when you turn up one of the input channels, you're actually making use of the low latency monitoring, letting you listen to your inputs without any delay. To quickly zero a fader, you can hold Alt and click on the fader cap. These three channel types will allow you to build up your main monitor mix, as well as up to 4 additional cue mixes found to the right of the channels in the master section. In the master section, you are able to toggle between different cue mixes, letting you create custom headphone mixes for artists you're recording. Simply click on the cue mix you want to edit and adjust the faders. Each cue has its own color associated with it, which can be seen in the cue name and also in the colored bar above the channels. Like the channel names, the cue name can be customized by double-clicking and renaming. If you want to preview a cue mix, you can hit the solo button in the cue window. You can also adjust the master level of a cue mix here too. The meters will show you the overall level of a cue, and the chronometer along the bottom will show the level over the last 20 seconds, so you can see that the audio signal is being sent, and you can keep an eye out for any clipping. Next, we have the monitor control buttons. Here you have a number of different functions that can be used to help improve your workflow in the studio, including Talkback, Polarity, Mono, Alt Speaker, Dim, and Cut. The Polarity button will flip one side of the stereo field whilst also activating Mono, using phase cancellation to cut out the center of the stereo signal and playing only the sides. This is a great way to get mix inspiration by removing center panned signals in existing records, or to check the sides of your own mixes and make sure that any reverbs and delay tails are sounding as good as they can. The Mono button will sum the stereo mix bus into a mono signal, which is useful for checking if your mix will sound good on mono sources such as mobile devices. The Alternate Speakers button enables you to quickly switch speakers at the touch of a button. Once configured, you can toggle between different speakers or headphones, and you're able to match the level of the second set of speakers using the Alt Speaker trim found in the system panel, which we'll have a look at later. Each one of these monitor controls can be assigned to a function button by right-clicking and selecting the function button you want to assign it to. This gives quick and flexible access to your monitor controls in the middle of a session. There are dedicated buttons on iD44 to cut and dim the speaker output, which will temporarily mute or lower the level of the output while retaining your preferred listening level, perfect for having a quick word with someone in the studio. You can also control how much the dim lowers the level in the system panel. There is also a dedicated Talkback button, which opens up a line of communication between the engineer and artist, either using one of the mic inputs or any mic connected to your computer. This is configured in the system panel, which we will go over now. The system panel is where you can change most of the inner workings of iD44. On the left-hand side, you have the digital settings. Here you can select the digital protocol you want to use for your digital inputs and outputs, either ADAT or SPDIF. You are able to choose different protocols for the different individual inputs and outputs. Below this is the preferred clocking source. Here you can select whether you want to use iD44 as the master clock by setting internal, or whether you are wanting to slave iD44 from one of the external digital inputs. The LEDs next to the digital sources will show you the status of the clock for that digital input. If you have selected an external clock but the indicator is red, then this indicates that there is no clock signal on the input. This could be because a cable isn't connected or the wrong digital protocol is being used. A yellow indicator shows that a valid clock is available, but the sample rate doesn't match the current operating sample rate of the iD44, so you'll need to go and change the sample rate of iD44 or the device so they match up. A green indicator means that a valid clock is present on that input and it's at the correct sample rate, so you're ready to record. For information on clocking and setting up iD44 with digital equipment, please click the card in the top right of this video to find out more. Below the preferred clock source, you have the Mono mode, letting you adjust which output is used during mono summing. At the bottom are the trims for the dim and alt speakers, allowing you to set the output level when the dim or alt button is pressed. And now we move on to the routing panel, which has a number of tabs allowing you to control the output routing for the analog outputs and both the digital outputs. The sources are displayed horizontally along the top, and the outputs are vertically on the left. To route the signal, click the button that lines up with both the source and destination you want. By default, the main mix is routed to analog outputs 1 and 2, which means that everything you've turned up in the main mix will be sent to your main speaker outputs. Alt Speaker will switch that particular output to play the main mix when the Alt Speaker button is pressed. This can be used for speakers or headphones. If you have built a low latency monitoring mix for an artist on one of the Q mixes and you want to send it to an output, you would select one of the buttons below the appropriate Q mix. You could therefore send QA to headphones 1, for example. DAW through allows you to directly route signal from your DAW to a physical output. So for example, if you set outputs 3 and 4 to DAW through, this means that anything that is sent out of output 3 and 4 in your DAW will get sent directly to the physical outputs 3 and 4, bypassing all routing and volume controls. This is useful if you want to send pre-recorded audio to external gear at full line level in the iD mixer. Because of this, you'll need to be careful of using DAW through on your main outputs, as it will send full volume audio to your speakers, which might not be very pleasant. You will get a warning explanation every time you select it, just in case you press it by mistake. You can set the outputs to mono by pressing the stereo button on the left. This will allow you to choose different sources for each output. This is useful if you want to send two mono signals to different pieces of outboard gear from output 3 and output 4, for example. The routing matrix works exactly the same for the digital outputs as it does for the analog outputs. By default, the digital outputs are all set to door through, meaning you can send the signal out of outputs 9 and 10 in your door, and it would send signal to the first two channels of the first digital output. The final tab in the routing panel is the Talkback tab, where you can select the input that you'll be using for your Talkback source. Here you have the option of one of iD44's inputs, whether analog or digital, or you're able to use an external source, which could be your computer's inbuilt mic or even a USB microphone. When selecting an internal source, it gives you the choice of the currently available input channels. Simply choose the input that your Talkback microphone is connected to, and you're ready to go. Selecting an external output gives you a list of the audio devices currently connected to your computer, which can be used as a Talkback source. Select the device you wish to use, and if applicable, choose the input channel. When a Talkback source is selected, that channel will turn into a Talkback channel in the iD Mixer window. An external source will come in on the door return 10 channel. A Talkback channel can be identified by its solo and mute channels changing into a Talkback button, which will trigger the Talkback. By default, the Talkback channel will be routed to all the Q mixes ready to be sent to your artist headphones. Once you've set up the iD Mixer just how you want it, you can save it as a preset, or even store the settings on the unit itself, so you don't even need to open the iD Mixer to recall all your settings. To save a current setup, simply go to File, Save, and you can now give the configuration a name to remember it by and click Save. You can also export the configuration to send to friends or collaborators or to store along with your project. To recall a preset, simply go to File and then click Open. A list of your previously saved presets will appear. Choose the one you wish to use and click Load. The mixer will now change to that particular preset. If you plan on using iD44 away from a computer, then you can save a preset directly onto the iD44 itself, known as a standalone state. This is great for complex monitoring mixes out on the road. So to do this, simply go to the Setup menu and select Store Standalone State. The current configuration of the mixer will then be saved into iD44's memory. It's worth noting that the Mixer app will always take preference over the standalone settings, so if the app is loaded and the unit is connected, then the standalone setting will be replaced. Occasionally, we will release firmware updates for the iD44 to add new features or to maintain compatibility with any new operating system releases. To ensure your iD44 is running the latest version of firmware, simply go to the Help menu and select Check for Updates. The iD Mixer application will check if any updates are available, and if so, will prompt you to install them. If your computer doesn't have an internet connection, you can also update using a locally stored firmware file, which will be available for download on our website. Simply click Next once you've selected the file location and click Update. The process will take around a minute, and the iD44 may make a few clicking sounds when the relays change during the process. Once completed, reboot the iD44 fully to finalize the installation. We hope that this video has given you an idea of the capabilities and powerful features of the iD Mixer, and that you find it a useful tool to add to your workflow. For more information about iD44 or the iD Mixer, please look at the product manual, which is available for download on our website, or have a look at some of our other help videos.